Welcome, everybody. Episode 35 of Christian Geeks Classic Rockcast with your hosts, myself, Steve Chalk, and Britt Mooney.
What's up, everybody?
What's going on, Britt?
Everything School good? Is back in session.
Yes, those of you who live north of the Mason-Dixon line don't understand this because your kids just got out of school.
Like a week ago.
Yeah, but here in the South, our kids just went back to school this week. So, yeah. But even though it's still like a blazing 95 degrees outside every day, it's
so hot today.
But yeah, so they're back in school. That means our wives are back at work and stuff.
And I got to give you a hard time this morning in the bus lane.
Yeah.
Or the drop off for the kids, and it actually gave me the opportunity to get a picture of Hosanna. She wasn't going to let me do a picture, but then Mr. Steve Chalk mentioned it, so
got to do it.
It's not Dad. Dad didn't do it. Dad didn't say anything.
Well, I got a picture of her last year too with the group, so it's all good. See, the thing is, Britt and I we see each other occasionally face to face, but our kids go to the same school. Our wives work at the same school, and every now and then Britt and I see each other in person. And today was one of those days in the bus lane. So
good day.
First day of school. But my big news is well, first of all, before we talk about my big news, because this is really important, today on the episode, our featured album is the choir's Circle Slide.
Circle Slide.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So this is as if you've listened to the podcast much, you'll understand this is more my album than Britt's. So
that's the way it should be. I'm in. I'm it's going to be good.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. But anyway, my big news is this morning I had coffee for the first time in 30 days.
Wow.
30 days. I took 30 days and we did we gave up sugar, caffeine, bread, dairy.
Wow.
And like carbs, like white rice and potatoes and that kind of stuff. And somehow I'm still alive. Man, that cup of coffee was so good this morning. Oh my gosh.
Was it Phoenix coffee?
It was not. I'm sorry.
What?
I rotate. I have the thing is Britt works for Phoenix Coffee. I have a subscription for Phoenix Coffee, and I get one bag of Phoenix every month. And I go by their roastery, and I pick it up, and it's fresh and delicious. And then, but I have another subscription service where I get another one. And the oldest bag of coffee was I had to crack that sucker open.
Oh, okay, got it.
But I had to crack open the oldest, and I'm going to work my way through. But I have gotten a request when somebody at work found out that I was not doing coffee for the month. They asked for a bag of one of my bags of Phoenix. So I'm like, no.
They're taking advantage of your pain.
It's like, no, you cannot have my Phoenix coffee. But I digress.
It'll still be great coffee in another month. You can wait.
Well, I mean, you guys you roast this. This episode is not sponsored by Phoenix, by the way, except in so much as Britt is paid by them and he's able to spend time on this podcast because he has a job. But yes, it's so fresh when I pick it up that it's
it's true.
It lasts. It lasts a little bit.
It does.
but yeah. So you want to hit up some news here? I got a little bit.
Let's do it.
All right. So as we mentioned on our previous special episode that we put out about Michael Bloodgood, Les Carlson has some new music that they just posted a tease for it. I don't know if they posted the whole thing or just I just heard
it was just like 30 seconds. It was just a little bit.
But he's got a new solo album coming out, and oddly enough, it sounds like Bloodgood-ish because it's less singing a hard rock song. So I think
it's Paul Jackson playing, and writing with him. So it's basically those two elements of Bloodgood. So
yeah. So it's going to be, and he even mentioned, I was watching some of his. He's been doing some live stream stuff on his Facebook page with his wife, and he basically admitted it's like, this is what I do. I do hard rock. I sound like myself. Paul's probably going to be playing guitar, so it inevitably will sound a lot like Bloodgood, and it's not intentional. It's just what they are. So,
yeah. Well, vocals, as we've talked about on this podcast, vocals is such a huge element of a band's sound that it's difficult for the same singer to go and do something different and not be compared, right? At least a little bit. So now, from little that I heard, it sounds fun, and there's going to be some more Bloodgood music because they had written some songs before he had the stroke, and of course now he's passed. So there'll be some Bloodgood official music, but Les will carry on with some of his solo stuff. So
yeah, so it's exciting. Next up, and a couple of these things are just things that I've randomly seen posted around, and this sort of like came out of the blue. It's not super relevant to me because except for one piece of it, Daniel Band's album On Rock, which I loved. And actually, when I saw this, I went back and listened to it, like almost immediately listened to the whole album. Still love it. Is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. So,
wow.
So it was put out in 1982, and they're doing an anniversary concert in Toronto on October 22nd. Now they're also playing at that Versailles, Ohio, whatever, the BMI Center big concert thing. It's funny. I put it in the show notes about every episode, but I still don't remember the exact name of the festival. But it's got
the Immortal
Sorry,
Festival.
But that's the one with Daniel Band, Sacred Warrior.
Yeah, man.
White Cross. God, it's gonna be incredible. But Daniel Band's playing there, but they're also doing a live stream of their show on October 22nd. So if you're not connected with them on Facebook, look them up, and then mark your calendars for October 22nd. I think that's a Saturday, so there'll be a live stream of that show. Or maybe if you're in Toronto and you want to go check it out, might not be a bad time. I'd love to see Daniel Band in concert, and because they were one of my bands in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next up, for those like Guardian fans, and we'll go back to Tempest. If you're a Tempest fan,
you will. The Rowe brothers.
Yeah, Jamie Rowe is. Jamie has a new solo project coming out, and if you follow him on Facebook or anything, you realize he's been a little all over the map. So he's
a good follow on social, man. He's a good follow.
He is, because he leaves it out there. Like he even goes into detail about how he used to wear a hairpiece about 5 years ago, and then he gave up on that and shaved his head, and
wears a lot of toboggans now.
Yeah, which I don't blame him. I mean, he and I have the same hairline. So, but anyway, so he's got he calls it a solo project, but he's doing it. He's doing it. He says kind of like 9 Inch Nails, because it's just one guy, but he has a band name. But he kind of wants to. But he says it kind of has a band sound. So his band is called Calamity Kills with K. Both of those words start with a K. And it's coming out on the 2nd of September, and it's heavy. It's kind of like a little dark.
I'm looking forward to it. The little snippets that he's played and how he's talked about it, I'm actually looking forward to it. I really am. I mean, he's got such a great blues sound. Like even if that's why he's such a great follower on social media. He hasn't really done it in a while that I've remembered, but every now and then he'll just get on there and with his guitar and just play something. And he still's got a great soulful sound. Yeah, got a good range, and sounds great.
Well, he's super talented. I mean, and even to this day, I mean, granted, we're probably about the same age, but like his voice is still good. I mean, and he's done some country stuff recently and some country rock, and you go back to his hairband days, and he's done a lot of stuff. But I'm curious to hear what this sounds like too. He put something about pre-ordering it, or pre-saving it or something, but I went and couldn't find it on Apple Music or Spotify. But you can look it up. Calamity Kills. Okay. And then I just saw this today. and it just got released today. You can order LSU's "This Is the Healing" on vinyl, remastered.
Wow. From where?
It is from, good question. It's actually on Bandcamp,
Oh,
and it's through the account Young Earth Records. I'll link it in the show notes for people.
yeah.
But
For me,
for you,
I actually really like that album.
I knew
I'm
you
not
did.
your cuss word, am I?
Oh, I just cranked that earlier today.
That is such a great tune.
But yeah, so it just literally it popped up today, and so you can go pre-order it. And it's funny because this is probably the most realistic delivery date that I've ever seen for one of these pre-orders. It says shipping out on or around August 1st, 2023. So they're basically saying like it's going to be a year. Just order it,
that's a
forget
long time.
about it, and
it'll be a nice little surprise.
I don't know how many, and the thing is, some of them, like that whole 77s 88 package I ordered, that thing took a long time, but I get it. There was so much stuff, and there was so many add-ons and so much stuff they had to put together. Like, I don't have any problem waiting a couple of years for something like that. I mean, I think I've trained myself to not be super like, oh my gosh, I ordered this today, I need it this week, for stuff like this. So anyway, so order it. It's going to be random colored vinyl. It looks like.
I'm so excited about this. I didn't even know about this.
Yeah. It literally just came out today.
Oh,
so there you go. So that's that, as they say, is that.
awesome.
Do you have any news on your end?
No, I do not. I've been so busy running around. I haven't really caught much besides the Michael Bloodgood stuff and Jamie Rowe, like a lot of stuff you've already mentioned. I don't have anything extra, but
yeah,
it's exciting time, man.
Yes, it is. Well, you want to start talking about some choir stuff?
Let's do it, man. I have listened to this album several times. Like this might be the most I've listened to the choir since maybe 91 or 2.
It's a big deal for you.
It is a big deal. I've actually really enjoyed it. It's really been very, very cool. Yeah. Go for it.
Well, I figure most of you are probably very familiar with the choir, but so indulge me for a moment. Well, I'll kind of introduce the band a little bit. So they started as youth choir.
Mm-hmm.
I want to put this on record. The band name The Choir, whereas I've grown to love it over the years. Google didn't exist when they first came out, and iTunes didn't exist. It's very challenging sometimes to find content on this band that I love,
right?
Because you get Brooklyn Tabernacle,
right?
You get you get everything. But
church choir, this church choir, that church choir. There's a lot of albums that are some church choir.
Oh my gosh, no kidding. So anyway, so they started as youth choir and put out Voices and Shadows and Shades of Gray, which was an EP that was in 85 and 86. Then they got signed to Myrrh Records, well, Myrrh LA. I still don't know that there's some distinguishing between Myrrh LA and Myrrh Records. So there was like an LA division, and then there was Myrrh Records, which was
those crazy California people.
I know. I
don't think that's be in there.
I think honestly, this is East Coast Steve talking, but I feel like probably nice.
I'm throwing gang signs.
Yeah, let's not do. I'm glad that there's no video to this. But the East Coast Steve says it's probably because the choir were kind of outside the mainstream and they were from LA, and it's like, okay, we can't have them on traditional Myrrh Records because they're a little too offbeat. They don't fit the mainstream, but that's just me. But the Diamonds and Rain came out in 86 and Chase the Kangaroo in 88, which I think that they were on the main Myrrh Records. I don't think Myrrh LA lasted very long. And then Wide Eyed Wonder in 89, and then Circle Slide in 90, which is the album that we'll be talking about today. So, and to me, this is something that, like, going back and listening to some of this music, and I'm a big choir fan going back, but it's like from Voices and Shadows to Circle Slide was only 6 years,
Mm-hmm.
and they put out 6 different releases, one of which was an EP. And we've talked about this before. It's like just the churn of putting out so much music, but they're all, in my opinion, incredible albums. I mean, the early ones, they're good. You can tell they're really young. They were a youth choir, it's in the name. But I mean, you can tell they hadn't quite gotten the maturity, but they were still incredibly talented. And so, I mean, that to me is probably about as strong of a 6 release span as you'll find in Christian music. I think there wasn't, in my opinion, there's not really a dud in any of those. And then the next year, it's funny because Circle Slide was, by all accounts, like their most sort of critically acclaimed album. I don't know how it sold, honestly, but then after that one, they went like indie. They went like, the next release was like Kissers and Killers, and that was, I think the next one was Kissers and Killers. Anyway, there were a few releases kind of in that span, Kissers and Killers and Flap Your Wings and some of those, and those were all just on indie small labels or self-released or whatever.
I wonder why, because listening to this album, so this album was made in 1990, and it fits. So here's one thing I really like about it. At least with this album, they weren't a copy of anybody.
Mm-mm.
They like it, it's not like Sacred Warrior. And we talk about them as like, oh, they're like Queensryche or something,
Mm-hmm.
And really, that's to me a very positive thing about a lot of the alternative Christian rock genre, is that really none of them were copies of anybody that I can remember. Right. Like, it wasn't like, oh, this guy's Bob Dylan or this guy's, I'm just making that up. But
yeah,
I mean, it's not like what you had in the metal industry where they were, I don't know if they were trying to be copies, but there were some closer things. But this album really fits in that sort of Gin Blossoms, Toad the Wet Sprocket stuff that was huge in the early 90s, and I'm really wondering why they didn't. I was listening to this album going, why didn't they really pick up in the early 90s? Like, this stuff is right in line with a lot of that stuff. Like, some of these could have been, because they weren't overtly Christian, some of these songs could have been out there in the mainstream, because a lot of Christian bands in the early 90s on the alternative side and pop side, they were getting out there into the mainstream. Anyway, it was a question I had when I was listening to it.
I have a little bit of insight on that, which I'll get to in a few minutes. Well, I'll get to it in a few minutes.
All right.
I still have a little bit of historical indulgence. Anyway, but their stuff after that was a little more alt rock. It kind of got out of, like, I'll say, borderline grungy at times.
Okay.
And to me, and this, I got when Kissers and Killers came out on vinyl, when it came out on, the regular release, I bought the CD, and I didn't love it. I think because it wasn't the choir I was used to, because it was a little hard edged, it was a little different. But then when they did the vinyl version of it, they released a acoustic version of that album.
Oh,
and that is incredible. And you realize at that point, these songs, it's almost like these songs were incredible choir songs that they just amped the distortion up on them a little bit for the album. But that's what was happening back in the 90s. And I think and I can't speak for them, but I felt like maybe they couldn't change their songwriting chops. They just changed the way it sounded, I guess, the way they recorded it. Anyway, I digress. So the band is largely made up of, especially for this album and and on and a couple before. Derry and Steve were kind of the main guys, Derry Doherty and Steve Hindalong. Derry is the songwriter or the music writer, the front man, the guitar player. I call him like an unassuming front man. He's kind of shy. He doesn't love the spotlight. And Steve is maybe a little more, doesn't mind the spotlight, but he's the lyricist. So he writes all the lyrics.
Right.
And he's also a percussionist, and he's multi-talented percussionist. And he plays a lot of other things too, I think, but it's percussion, for the choir is his main thing. And he's incredible. I mean, he does
good.
So much stuff. And then Dan Michaels, which we'll get into, is sax. He's the sax man, the Lyricon player. And to me, it's like he's an integral part of their sound. Like he is one of the reasons why it sets them apart, I think, because he doesn't like break out into like a Kirk Whalum solo where it's just like, he's all over the place. It's just kind of like, he just sort of fills the gaps with sort of like these, every now and then he gets a little frenetic, but
he's like a mood atmospheric kind of thing. I mean, he kind of pulls that in, and yeah, like I don't think there was any distortion on this album whatsoever. I mean, like it was very clean reverb. They like reverb on this album.
Oh yeah, delay, baby, delay,
big time. And but the musicians are incredible. I mean, it's not flashy metal guitar work, but the guitar work is still masterfully done. Like the guitar work is really, really good. And the drums are really nice. Like he's laying down some intricate patterns, but they fit, with the song. He's not trying to show off necessarily. And so it's very artsy. And like I said, I wasn't into Toad the Wet Sprocket. I mean, they had a couple hits, but I really liked the Gin Blossoms. Like that first Gin Blossoms album, I could probably play on the guitar and sing to you right now, like half of the songs. Like I loved that album.
Hey, Jealousy.
Hey, Jealousy. One of my favorite songs on that album, side note, was the last song. It wasn't even sung by the lead singer. It was a country song. Can't Call It Cheating. She Reminds Me of You.
Oh yeah.
It's a very country song. It was funny. Anyway, but yeah. So I like the style. I was just never into. To me, the choir. I've actually seen the choir several times, and ironically, I've never seen Bloodgood live. I've never seen Sacred Warrior. Never seen some of my favorite bands live, but I have seen the choir live, because of Intercedes and some of the stuff that they would have these guys in. And I just could never really get as excited about them as, some of the other ones like the 77s in that sort of era, but, or LSU. There's a couple of LSU albums I really dug, but no, I really liked this album though. When we were listening to it, it was really good.
Another kind of interesting anecdote for the choir that I'll get into before we get into the album itself, but at the radio station where I worked, which was largely a contemporary station, we were sent this album, and it got to the program director before I ever saw it, and I heard about it. And it's not this album. Sorry, I need to back up. It was Wide-Eyed Wonder. When that album was released, it got to our program director, and they approached me and said, "We can't play this album on the radio." And I was like, "Why?" And they said, "It's not religious enough. It's not a religious album. It's not a Christian album." And so, and it's interesting. And I had to reassure them that yes, the choir is a Christian band. There's nothing offensive on the album. It's just maybe a little more artistically stated than they were used to. But it's funny. I was reading an interview with Steve Hindalong in God's Not Dead, and Neither Are We, the book by Jerry Wilson. But he speaks a lot about that kind of stuff, about how they got that so much throughout the years of you're not Christian enough to be on Christian radio. You're not, even though they were on a major Christian label, you're not Christian enough to be on the Christian radio. And so he just kind of gave up on it, didn't care, didn't want to be on Christian radio, didn't listen to it. And that sort of, and I'll quote, there's a quote by him. It says, "We are Christians, and there was a lot of Christian content in our songs. We were trying to be deep and be poetic and moving. Maybe it was a little too subtle. It was definitely a little too subtle for a lot of people." And so I think there's a lot of truth in that, because they were kind of in that, like we were talking about Bloodgood on the Michael Bloodgood special thing that we did, where it's like they were kind of caught in that we're too metal to be Christian to some people, and we're too Christian to be metal to some people. It's like, and it's the same. It's a different thing with the choir. They were too subtle to be Christian, even though if you knew where Steve's heart was when he wrote these lyrics, it's like his heart is on his sleeve. I mean, he writes about everything. He writes about his marriage struggles. He writes about his faith struggles. He writes about, God's mercy. He writes about the wonderful things about being a Christian, about the tough things about being a Christian. But he's super poetic because he considers himself a poet, and I do too. So
yeah, no, there's we'll get to it, but there's a couple amazing lines in this album. I mean, like really very impressive lyrics and structure and songwriting.
Oh yeah,
but
so,
no, yeah, good.
Specifically this album, so we'll get into the album now. It's funny because I don't think about it much, but I started looking at the album. There's 9 songs. 2 of them feel like introductions to other songs.
Yeah, they're not really songs. So
it's really like 7 good solid songs, which almost is just above an EP.
Right.
But I mean, I don't have a problem with that. It was just an observation. But super moody. The lyrics, I think, like I just mentioned, the lyrics for this album were largely informed by Steve's life at the time. A lot of what was going on with him, and a lot of what was going on with the band, because I think the band was struggling a lot at this point because they had tried to get success. They felt like they were good enough to be successful, and it had just not clicked. I mean, I think they again critically acclaimed, a lot like King's X. I think the critically acclaimed, people loved them. They had a strong core group of fans, but nothing really clicked. And so they were trying to get in the mainstream, and that wasn't working. And so they were, living paycheck to paycheck or royalty check to royalty check or whatever. And it was tough. It was tough on their marriages because they toured a lot. It's just, it's like I said, hard on their sleeve in a lot of ways. And, and specifically about this album, I think artistically there's tons of contribute. Like Mark Hurd is on this album, Jerry Chamberlain from Daniel Amos. Speaking of LSU, Mike Sauerbray is on here, and he was a big part of LSU for a while. Steve Griffith from Vector. He I think he mixed it maybe, and he was also sang on it some. It's funny because when I'm listening to a sentimental song, when Steve Griffith does his background, I'm like, that's Steve Griffith, that's Vector, because it stands out to me very, very clearly. But then Sharon McCall, and there's just a lot of great musicians.
Well, they were, from what I read, they were a part of a lot of that California group, like the Altar Boys, and they toured with Adam again. That's one of the times I saw them was with Adam again. So they were part of, like, Ricky Michelle was part of stuff that they did at times, and so they were part of that whole group. And I think a lot of those bands were closer than I realized at the time, because so many of them came from the same area, some from the same church, even. They just all came. And I do think that there's a lot of value in expressing things in a different way. I have no problem with, I don't think it's unartistic to come out and be in your face and evangelical and just, when we went over Detonation, I think Crucify is one of the most creative songs around. But it's a different creative than this, right? But I think this is very creative too. And, we'll get into the songs. but the album is extremely well produced, and it's, I don't think it's overproduced. There might be too much reverb, but I don't think it's overproduced. It's just very well put together. The sound, everything's got its space in the mix, and so it was just really really interesting the way they did it.
Musically, Derry is known for, he doesn't write like thick, complex music. I mean, it's reasonably sparse, but it's one thing I love about the album is you can hear all the parts. You can hear the bass, you can hear the guitar, you can hear the drums.
Yeah.
You can hear the sax when it comes in and goes out and that sort of thing. I mean, and I will say, I'll have to admit this, and I admitted this to you earlier today. This is not my favorite Choir album. And I think the reason why is because, and I hope the Choir fans don't crucify me for this, but okay, it's just a lot of people's favorite album, but it's not my favorite album. I think because I think that they are so good at writing like melodic, catchy songs, there's a few on this album, but I think there's Wide-Eyed Wonder to me is probably my favorite, and Chase the Kangaroo and this one are probably tied for second, maybe. But they're very different. Like they took a step, I think, deeper and a step more. They experimented more with this album, and I think that's why people love it so much, because they took chances that. But again, Wide-Eyed Wonder has more just like To Cover You and just all those songs that they're just good, like rock songs done by the choir. So
yeah,
but that's neither here nor there. So don't get upset with me, people. Put your pitchforks and torches away. All right. Circle Slide, the song Circle Slide starts out the album.
Oh, wait, we didn't do the artwork.
Oh, the art. I always forget that.
It's your thing.
It was my idea in the first place. I love the artwork.
I love it too. I think it's cool.
I think, and I love the on the new version, the remastered version, how they did it in color. I think looks fantastic. But it's actually a diorama. I read where it cost them like $3,000 or something to produce the diorama and get it photographed. Is that a word? Photographed. But yeah, I mean, I love it. I've always really, really, really liked their album covers. Kissers and Killers was very plain. There's really nothing to it, but it's like, for the most part, the Choir's album covers have always been really good.
Yeah.
How about you? What do you think?
Oh, I really like this album cover. I think it has a lot of it's just a cool picture. I dig it.
I dig it, man. Okay. Songs. Circle Slide.
It's a great opener.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, I think this song, to me, it's, if you take the vocals off of it and just play the instrumental track, it would sound almost like experimental jazz. Because it's just kind of like the drums and the guitar and it's just, I don't know, all that. It feels that way to me.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a little on the slower side. Definitely not ballady, but it's a little on the slower side. But it fits the theme of the lyrics of it's like a circle, and I like the imagery of the song. I think the timing of the lyrics and the melody of the verses they're a little ahead of their time, to be honest with you. Because I was listening to it and going, man, it's hard to explain, but just when you do lyrics in a verse, or like the more diverse, it's more modern to be more diverse about where it lands according to the beat, right? And it was, this one had a very cool, diverse timing to the melody of, especially the verses. I think the chorus is really nice, man. I really like the chorus, and it just kind of fits their style. and it's really nice. It's like nicely done. I dig it. I dig this song.
Yeah, and I had to remind myself of what does circle slide mean, because it's such a strange. You've got the tree with the ropes, the tire swing and everything, and just kind of like I dove a little deeper, and basically what Steve said is that a nonstop circular slide. Well, actually, it talks about like if it was a circular slide that you could get on and you never had to get off. So it went in a circle, and he said, and this is quoted. I think I saw this on Wikipedia or something. It was the closest thing to heaven that I could imagine, is what Steve said.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I got from it. Like there was this heavenly reality that he was considering in the midst of kind of not mundane, but kind of everyday life here on earth, and that's what I got from the lyrics. And again, it is very poetic. I don't have a problem with that. I think there's a place for that. And I think that it's cool. And so that is what I got from it. I didn't know exactly what he was saying, but you kind of got that imagery of the song, like, let's consider there's this heavenly thing going on, but we're kind of dealing with all this stuff down here. But it was good.
Yeah, and the poetry aspect and the depth of the lyrics and everything on this are just it's some of his best lyrics, I think. I mean, and again, I think their entire catalog is full of incredible lyrics, but diving deep on this album, which honestly, it's like we dive deep on this podcast to these things, and that's when I really get into it, and I start like going, and that's it. And I could go back and probably do that for most of their records, but today I'm doing that for this record. So, the next song is "If I Had a Yard," which always, to the teenage me, was always very strange. But now as an adult, I kind of get it.
Here's one of my hot takes. This song, and there's one more, it feels like a poem that was written first that he gave to Derry Doherty, and he just put music to it. That's how it feels. Like, and then they just decided to get all artsy fartsy with it along the way. And so there's just some really interesting stuff that he's doing with the drums. It builds along the way, and then it backs off and builds back again. I'm really wondering there's another instrument in there that's not in the liner notes that I was looking for it. I think it's a harmonica, either that or it's some weird guitar sound that he's kind of pulling in. But when I was looking at Discogs, it didn't say what it was. But
there's a wah-wah pedal, a wah-wah sax.
Maybe it's the wah-wah sax. Maybe that's what it was.
I just assumed that every weird sound in a choir song, Dan Michaels did it.
Is the Dan guy. I think you're right. But I was just it sounded almost like a harmonica. And I was like, it's not like a distorted or something with effects to it. I mean, to me, it's kind of I wouldn't have put this as the second track on an album personally. I don't think it's strong enough coming out of the gate for me, because it's so artsy and I'm just not. It's so artsy and moody, and that's I'm not as big on the artsy moody music, but I think it's interesting. It's definitely got some interesting parts to it. And he really is a great drummer. There's a couple of these songs I was like, dude, that's really nice.
But and the thing, I mean, the main point of this song is they were all poor and they wish that they had enough money to afford a house.
Right.
It's like, these are all the things I would do if I could afford a house.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. I mean, it's like, I feel fortunate to have a house and a yard to play in, but it's like, when you're doing the things that they do and struggling the way that they had to struggle as, quote unquote Christian musicians, musicianaries.
I like that word. Did you just come up with that?
Nah, I've heard it somewhere before.
Oh, okay.
I can't take credit for that. But and then they would never call themselves that because they were very clear. And this kind of goes back to a point you were saying earlier. They were friends and they played a lot of shows with the Altar Boys and Undercover and some of those back then more evangelistic bands. But he said they talked about how they were in Orange County and that's where they were based out of. They were from LA, which it seems like they're in the same place, but apparently, I mean, those are like an hour apart.
Yeah, it's different.
And we kind of talked about that with Alan Aguirre.
Yeah.
Like, he was from LA. Orange County was whole different world. So, and they didn't give altar calls. They tried to fit, like square peg round hole with that for a while. And they just said, it's not genuine.
Yeah.
It's not genuine for us to do this. So we're not going to do that. But anyway, another digression.
Yeah.
It's not my favorite song, musically, but then it's not as melodic as this kind of stuff I like. So yeah, it's not my favorite. And the long fade at the end is just very long.
Well, but I mean, if you like this style of music, it's similar to, I'm not saying they sound like the Cure, but it's similar to the Cure, where it's just some of their stuff was just experimental. Like,
yeah,
he wasn't trying to write a hit song. He was just trying to be artsy, and he did write, for the Cure, like he did write hit songs, but at the same time, it was like, sometimes he was just being weird. He had a weird idea and and he had the space and the time on an album to do it. And I think that's what you have a couple times here.
Oh yeah, for sure. And this was their last album with Myrrh. So I don't know if that had anything to do with if they were at the end of the contract and they were just kind of like, we're going to do what we want. Might be some truth to that.
Well,
too.
But I think that, to one of our points earlier, was that for a lot of these Christian bands, I don't know how much of it was pressure from the record label, but man, they put out albums every year. That is really difficult creatively. When you are touring and writing and doing all of that at the same time, and you're not making much money, and you might have to have a second. I mean, just think about it, like putting out an album every year. So that's why you have a couple of these filler songs that I think he was like, all right, we got to come up with 9 songs. I've got this poem. Why don't we just do something really interesting with it? And they did, and it was interesting. And they're such good musicians; they can make it work.
Yeah, yeah.
That's my hot take.
And going back again, digressing to a point you made earlier that I said I would get to. I'm eventually getting to it, but it's you talk about like, why didn't these guys take off in the mainstream? Why they had opportunities. Like the version of this album I have is on Epic Records,
right?
And we'll get to it later, but when we talk about Restore My Soul, but it didn't click really. And they had, I want to say, Wide Eyed Wonder was released by A&M Records, and mostly from what I gathered, from what I read in different places, interviews and things, the record labels, because they had the word Myrrh and they were Myrrh Records with A&M, like the one I have here. I mean, it says Epic Records, and this is like, this one's actually released on Epic Records. It doesn't say anything about Myrrh on it, but especially the A&M one, it was Myrrh A&M or whatever. But they're categorized automatically as a Christian band. And they get put in the Christian band section. So they don't even have the opportunity to reach, because in their mind, the way they were going to reach souls for God is by being incredible musicians, by being super poetic, by being deeper than, not to throw anybody under the bus, but, like Mylan or Petra or Carmen or something like that. Those guys might be more popular, but these guys are going to reach people those guys would never reach. Right. But they weren't really given the opportunity, because when the record stores got it, they go throw in the Christian section, and none of the people that are trying to reach shop in the Christian section. And then they were also courted by IRS Records, which was an alternative label back in the 80s and 90s, which was run by Stuart Copeland's brother. That's all I remember. I don't remember his name, but Stuart Copeland from the Police, and
okay.
and apparently he really liked the choir, and he was interested, but he said no, he didn't want to like sign them or anything, because he's like, basically they've been around so long. If they were going to break big, they already would have broken by now. So he didn't want to like waste time and energy on it. So, so it's kind of disappointing. I mean, because I think they probably could have done bigger, better things. It's just the opportunity never really hit.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, when I was listening to this album, I was like, okay, there were definitely pockets of that genre that I loved, but this fits it. Like, I was like, this is as good as anything else that was out there that was hitting it big in the early 90s and whatever was going on with that sort of genre, with that kind of the pop alt rock sort of stuff that was going on. So yeah, I was like, I don't know why this wouldn't have.
Yeah.
It was as good as anything else, in my opinion.
Agreed. Well, the next song is one of my favorite songs, a sentimental song. Yeah. I love it. I love how the guitar starts out, sets the tone for the whole song. It's just emotional, sounds good. Yeah, and the chorus is one of those, like, I don't have to, I can not listen to this album for 6 months, and that chorus will come back in my head and start, that's an earworm. It just starts flowing through my brain.
Yeah, I really dig this song. And here's something that I like about the choir, and great songwriters do this. When you have a song, and it's, even if it's a happy song, it can be a great song, but there's something interesting, a little more interesting about a song that's like this, but the lyrics aren't all happy. Does that make sense? Like, the chorus sounds like it should be a happy song, but then when you start reading some of the lyrics, there's questioning, there's problems, and there's struggle. And I think that is needed in artistic expression, that that these things can coexist, right? Struggle and problems can exist with an element of joy, and there's glory amongst the dirt, sort of thing. So yeah, and this song is just, it's got a nice poppy hook to it, and but it still has that depth, that it's not just simply a fun song. It's got some depth to it, so I dig it.
Yeah, and it's one of my favorite songs, and again, because this is the melodic choir that I love. I mean, I love all their stuff, but you know me, I am a sucker for a good hook, and this song hooks me. So, and like, I think, like, to me, the chorus, like I said, is an earworm. It's super. It sounds good. I love it. The verses are very disjointed sounding, but I think it's because the percussion is so offbeat and different and weird. But it's great. I mean, it's like he does it so well, and he's super artistic with it. But and the bridge, like with the echoing vocals and stuff that kicks off the third chorus, I love that. I love it.
Yeah, that was cool.
I don't even want to mimic it because I can't, because I don't have an echo on my voice. It sounds still. I sound like a crow.
Was that a seagull? Did a seagull? Did a seagull just fly through your house?
Yeah. I'm sorry, Darian, Steve, and Dan. So the next song is "Merciful Eyes," which is just a beautiful song. I think it's, again, not my favorite on the album, but it's really, really nice.
It is one of my favorites. This is definitely one of my favorites. As a songwriter, this is one of the ones that has really impressed me, because the verses kind of go into the need for mercy, and then you talk about mercy. I mean, it's not, it's really, but it does it in a very artistic, poetic way. The song is in 3/4. If you were a musician and you wanted to argue that it was actually 6/8, I probably wouldn't argue with you. It's probably more like 6/8, but they feel very much the same. If you think about it, 3/4, 6/8, but it's probably more like 6/8. And I love that. And I think it breaks up. It does a good job breaking up the album in a little different time signature, and 6/8 3/4 is a little more of an innocent sort of beat, and what I mean by that is 3/4 definitely is more of a waltz, so it's a little more of an older traditional sort of beat, if that makes sense. And this people may not think this way, but it just kind of subconsciously brings you back to a little bit more of an innocent sort of idea. And they're talking about merciful eyes, and so and one of my favorite lines, if not my favorite line on the album, is, "Did I smell love decaying and call it perfume?
Mm-hmm.
Should a justified man know the grave from the womb?" I was like, that is powerful. That is there's a couple great lines, great rhyme. I mean, like who has rhymed perfume and womb, right? You know what I mean? Like, but it works. This is one of my favorites. And I think the 3/4, and they do a lot more on the one. If you're a songwriter and you know what I'm talking about, melodies that start on or before the one just kind of have a little bit more energy to them. So this song has a little bit more energy to it. And not that it's fast, it's just the placement of lyrics can give a song a little bit more energy or less. And so I dig it. It's really good.
Yeah, and to me, the chorus is like the lyrics for the chorus. "When I turn from your face, render mercy and grace. Red blood rain from the sky. God have merciful eyes." I mean, it's probably the most powerful lyrics. I mean, as a whole on the whole album.
Yeah, it's really good.
Next song, "Tear for Tear."
Not Tears for Fears.
No,
is that different?
Fears for Tears. No, I'm kidding. Tear for Tear, which is, it's just a simple little tune with just Derry playing the guitar and singing. And to me, I consider this the intro for About Love. In fact, sometimes I have to remind myself it's a separate song.
Right. Well, this is the other one I was talking about. This is the other one that was like, it feels like, I could be totally wrong, the guys who are doing this album probably have no care in the world what I think, probably. But the way I feel about it is, this is the other one that Derry was given, "Hey, I got these lyrics. I got this poem. Do something with it." And he just, well, it's only a couple verses. It's only a couple stanzas or something. So boom, here it is. But it's okay.
I mean, that would be out of character for them, but I'm not saying it didn't happen. But I know that typically it was like Derry would write the music, and then Steve would fill the music with lyrics. But it could very well be that way. I mean, who are we to say?
I have admitted I know way less than you already about this band. I've enjoyed this album, but. And so just as a songwriter, that's the way it felt to me.
Good observations. But yeah, I love it. It provides a perfect intro into About Love, which is my favorite song on this album.
This is the most Gin Blossom song on this album. I love it
though. And maybe that's why I love the Gin Blossoms too.
This is the Gin Blossoms. They weren't copying it, but it definitely had that feel and that style.
It's really just a catchy song. Yeah. This is one I love to play on the radio. Loved it.
Did you play it on the radio?
Oh yeah.
Even though they told you not to?
Oh, that was years before. That was Wide Eyed Wonder, which I also played on the radio.
You're such a rebel, man.
I am.
You're such a rebel. This is another one of those that could have easily been a cheeseball lyric that, because he's a good lyricist, he wouldn't allow it to be that way. There's something wonderful about love, and then he's like, there's something funny about sad things or something. You're like, whoa, that's kind of a weird lyric to throw in there, but like they make it work,
Well, and if you know what the song is about, it makes perfect sense. Well, first of all, the song was originally apparently written to say there's something pitiful about love. But he changed it to wonderful, I guess, to kind of fit the mood a little bit better. But what I read was it was written right before, it was written on the day before they left to go on the Wide-Eyed Wonder tour. And Emily, which was I guess Steve's daughter, was about a year old, and Steve's wife Nancy was pregnant, and they had just found out she was pregnant, and then he's getting ready to go on the road, and they were just like apparently crying. But it's the whole song. If you listen to it, it's about trying to maintain a relationship with your family when you're away from them for months at a time, and it's actually kind of heartbreaking when you read the lyrics from that standpoint. It's like,
yeah. Because I mean, the verses have a lot of, and there's a couple lines in the chorus too, but because they're the third line, I think they switch it up, the lyric. They switch up the lyric, and which is cool. I love it when bands do that. But you know, the verses have more of some dark and kind of searching, questioning sort of element to it. And again, to me, it makes it more interesting than if it had just been, "You're so beautiful. We have such a great time together. Something wonderful about love." Like, it's been done, you know. But like, makes it a little bit more interesting, you know. And I like it.
And honestly, it's like in doing some research on the band and reading things, and interviews and whatnot, it wasn't all hunky dory.
Of course.
For either one of these guys. I mean, it was apparently a major struggle for both of them. And Derry goes into detail in Jerry Wilson's book about how, like, his struggle with going on the road. He said, like, when he would get ready to go on the road, like about 10 days before he left to go on tour, he said that his wife would go into nesting mode, and they would start, like, she would start basically kind of excluding him because it's like they were preparing for life without him. And it was really weird for him. And he felt sort of disjointed and disconnected. Then he'd be gone for a few months. And then he'd come home like a knight in shining armor. Like, "I just came home from tour. Look at me." And they'd be like, "We've been surviving without you for 3 months. And right now you're kind of like messing up the flow." And he's like, "Wait a minute. I'm just came home from tour."
Yeah, military families have a lot of the same struggles.
I'm sure.
And that, and I've talked with them about that, and where you're right, they have to learn how to do it without the one of them there, usually the man, but without one of them there, and it's hard to readjust back, because he wants to come back and be a part of it, and they're like, "Yeah, we didn't really." Because a guy, we all want to feel needed, right? And so, so I can totally see that with being on the road, and it's not like you're like in a secular band where you're like, we're just partying all the time. Like, you want to have that connection, you want to have a strong family, as a Christian and stuff.
Yeah. And that's the pressure. I mean, that's the pressure. Yeah. It's like you feel like you failed in a lot of ways if you can't keep your family together. And both those guys are, like, Derry and Steve are both divorced from their wives at the time that this album was put out. So, I mean, Steve, God bless him, he just got engaged. So congratulations to Steve. But yeah, so again, it's like reading through this and reading these interviews and stuff. And this album just kind of takes a different turn. And honestly, it's like a lot of their lyrics are all very personal. So, next tune, Blue Skies. Musically, it's like, I think it's really cool because it's like Steve is playing only floor toms for the whole song, which is pretty cool. And then he plays harmonica and actually does a dang good job of it too. And
this might be my favorite.
Really? The lyrics actually inspired the album cover.
Okay.
So that's kind of where they got the idea.
I love the melody of this song, and it's very simple and sparse. The music is very sparse, and it's got a very, like, the melody fits the lyric so well, of this longing sort of emotion of it, and it all works. And I'm a sucker for, all sorts of things. But one of the things I am a sucker for is you know, this is how you can tell something is an amazing song, is when you can do it with just one instrument and one vocal, and it still makes you, it still pulls on you, you know, it still moves you. And that's when you know, and I, you know, I love all sorts of metal, intricate stuff, and, you know, I'm progressive. I love it all. That's amazing to me too. But I'm just a sucker for some of these where it's like, man, it's just simple, but it works. So I really dig this one, and the Mercy song, Merciful Eyes, are probably my two favorites on this album. Really, really nice song. I would play and sing this song live. Like I could see myself pulling out a guitar and just playing this song, like really nice.
Yeah, it's a good tune. And actually, one of the things I like about it too is it looks back to Robin Had a Dream on Wide-Eyed Wonder, which, if you're familiar with that song, when he says, "One sister saw me go under the knife, glad it was a dream." So that was, if you know Robin Had a Dream, it's a weird song. That is a weird song. That was probably the song that was read the lyrics of on Wide-Eyed Wonder, and so this is not a Christian album. Not because it's particularly bad, it's just weird. So next song, which is barely a song, Laugh Loop.
It's not a song.
It's not a song.
But isn't it? It's like Emily. It's like his daughter or something that's laughing or something, which is kind of cool. But it's Emily laughing for like 2 seconds, and then that's played over and over again for like a minute. Yeah. So maybe that's enough. It's a skipper, really. To me, it's a skipper.
Yeah, I mean, no offense, but Laugh Loop is but Restore My Soul, this was going to be the big rock single. And so this was the song that Epic released as a rock single and was supposed to be the big thing that was going to be pushing them to, you know, alt rock radio and all this stuff. And apparently they just did nothing with it. And so that's why the record really didn't sell. But, and actually it was pushed to Christian radio as well. But I didn't love it as a rock single because it's not a radio friendly song.
I totally agree. I think I did not know any of that. And my gut reaction is that's a mistake. Like, there are some amazing songs on this album. The Blue Skies, you got the About Love, you've got Merciful Eyes, you got Sentimental Song. Like, I would have released any of those 4 songs, or all 4 of them. And the one I would not never, but like would have been way down on my list was Restore My Soul. I'm not saying I don't like it, but to me, it's as far as the actual song, melody and everything, I think it's more average. And it's more of an average song. It's feels like more of a poem set to music. It's very moody and atmospheric, which is cool. I really like the musical end to it, the musical draw, the musical kind of riffing. It's not really riffing in a rock sense, but, you know, like they're not jamming, but like a lot of the stuff that they're doing there at the end is very interesting.
Oh yeah.
And the Lyricon sounds really cool. It's more than meets the eye, obviously, but you know, I think it's an interesting song, but I would never have picked this song for a radio hit, a radio single. Personally, I would be like, eh.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, for me, this was one of the best songs to see live in concert because that end part would just, I mean, they would riff, they would jam on that, and that was fun.
That's cool.
So it's so that's a good song. But again, I'm in total agreement with you. I think, and I'm not a record executive. I'm not an A&R guy. I don't know, but I didn't love this song as a single when I was in radio, when it was released. Again, because it's not radio friendly.
It doesn't really have a hook. It's got an AAA structure, which we've gone over on this podcast before. It's got it doesn't really have a hook to it. And in my opinion, And that doesn't make it a bad song. It just doesn't make it one that I would have said, hey, let's try to introduce us to the world and gain some, like, it's not like they wrote a song to be a hit. It's like, okay, out of the songs that we have, what would work, and I would not, that's surprising to me. And it actually makes more sense why they didn't break in, because I think like About Love, it would have fit right there with Hey Jealousy and a lot of that stuff that was going on in the early 90s. I mean, it would have fit right in there with a lot of that stuff. And the I think the Blue Skies song, it might not have been a hit single. I don't know if it was that radio friendly, but I think the sentimental song too, very strong to me.
Yeah. No, I mean, again, it's like a lot of these, I mean, because the 77s have this, they sing from the same hymn book, which is, it would have been great if everything would have worked out on the major label, because both of them had mainstream record labels interested in putting out their music, and it just kind of didn't work. That would have been fantastic, but this is not the path that God had for us, And I know that Derry was asked, in the interview in Jerry's book, basically asked him, like, do you have any regrets, or would you do anything different again? And he said, if he would have done it over again, he would have scrapped the idea of trying to go be a Christian band or like pursuing that direction. He would have gone headlong into the mainstream market, because he feels like they were talented enough, and they are talented enough to be big in that world. But then he said that basically Steve reminded me that, like, if we did that, the fans who love us and are passionate about us today would probably not be fans. And so you can't really look in the past and say, like, oh, this is, because there's no guarantee they would have made it big. They might not have made it big. I mean, so, it is what it is. And I think and the thing is, they've continued to make music, and they still release things. And I'll continue to support them, because I think one of my favorite albums that they have ever released is Oh, How the Mighty Have Fallen, which was several albums after this. I think that came out in the early 2000s. It's just incredible. It's just so good. So if y'all haven't heard that, I recommend you go check that one out. But they've just produced so much good stuff. But again, this is a classic. I mean, it's just like it's on all the all-time, Christian alternative rock lists. It's usually top 10, top 5. It's a good one. It's not my favorite Choir album, but that's a personal preference. But I can't deny that it was influential, and great album.
Great album. Very nice.
Very, very nice. So that's all I got on the Choir Circle Slide. Actually, there's probably more I could pontificate about, but I think I've talked enough.
No, you answered some questions. Like I said, I wasn't as into the choir, so I did have some questions, but I learned a lot. Very good. And these just very talented people. I really appreciated I don't know that I would have appreciated the musicianship as much in 1990 as I do now. Like now I'm a little older, and I've played a lot more and listened to a lot. I appreciate a lot of the different levels of musicianship that were on this album. And so very good.
Well, it depends on where your head is. Because there's a lot of great albums that I didn't get into for one reason or another, just because of where my head was at the time.
Right.
Like I think about like post Freedom Whiteheart, or post Independence Day White. Like I didn't get into that as much. It's still great stuff, and I think I would enjoy it today, but it's because I was leaning more alt rock at the time.
Right.
And it's so yeah, it just depends on where your head is in those moments. But so that's it. That's this episode. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah.
We'll put links in the show notes to all the newsy stuff we talked about, and where you can I mean, the choir has tons of stuff available on their Bandcamp page, so we'll link that. You can get digital of just lots of out there. They're like them and the 77s are two of the, I think, most prolific, alt rock Christian artists still out there producing stuff, and also just letting their fans have stuff, commentaries, outtakes, demos. There's just gobs of stuff out there. And also I'll say Terry Taylor and Daniel Amos do a good job with that. They're all kind of that. They're the Lost Dogs. Everybody related to the Lost Dogs, super generous. So, so we'll put links to all that stuff in the show notes. If you're not connected with, I do want to say this. If you haven't given us a 5-star review, we've been stuck at 4.6 stars in Apple Podcasts. Please go give us a 5-star. I can't pay you because we don't make money on this, but I will pay you with love. I will, if you message us and tell us you gave us a 5-star review, I will shower you with glad tidings. I don't know if that's enough incentive, but anyway, so go check us out, subscribe to our podcast. If you're listening to it through Facebook or something like that, go to your podcast player, subscribe. We'd appreciate that. That all helps us out. And check us out on Facebook if you're not following us, and also on Instagram. I post a lot of pictures of things and different anecdotes and weird stuff there. So even completely unrelated to what we're talking about, to some people's chagrin.
Not to mine. It's always good. You do a good job.
Well, the problem is it's good stuff. And the problem is pretty much like everything I post, there's somebody that wants us to do a podcast on that specific thing, but I don't have the stamina to produce that many podcasts. I want to keep the content flowing on the socials. But I also don't want to do like 3 podcasts a week. I don't think I can keep up with that.
No, me neither.
But anyway, so just message us, tell us what you like. If you have an album you want us to cover, let us know. We'll try to put it in the mix if it fits what we're doing. Mostly, mid 80s to early to mid 90s Christian rock, and we'll see what we can do.
Absolutely.
What say you?
I say, especially if it's a Christian alternative, I would love to get back into some more of that. I was into some of it at the time, but it's been fun because I haven't kept up with as much of it. So it would be fun to go back to some of those albums. So any suggestions along those lines would be great too.
Yep.
Let's do it.
Very good. All right, people. Been fun, and we will stay tuned. We'll be back in 2 or 3 weeks with another fantastic episode.
That's right.
We'll see you then.
Peace out.